Hi, Professor Johnson. Hi, Professor Hennessy. Hi, Professor Hennessy.
Good morning. Good morning. Well, good morning here.
Thank you so much for joining us so early in the morning in the wonderful California. Just one quick remark. The conversation will happen in both English and Chinese. English from your side. Both Vice President Yang Bing and also Deng Feng will be using Chinese. We have simultaneous interpretation that's happening underneath as well. So unless you want to give your Chinese practice a go, I would assume. Yes, that's excellent. We're just waiting for Yang Bing to come in, and then we will start. Bear with us. And I think Mr. Deng Feng also has two additional questions that he would like to ask you as well. I don't know whether this would be a good time to communicate.
Well, yeah. Can you hear me?
Surely.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, I was just going to ask something about, like Stanford has been the leading university in terms of fostering entrepreneurship. And that actually very useful, in Tsinghua, right? So what I'm trying to ask is, can you share with us what did Stanford do to basically on entrepreneurship education? That's one. The other thing is in terms of the academics and the collaboration between academics and industry. Stanford has been doing extremely well, right, among other universities. So, and without Stanford, there's no Silicon Valley. People are saying that, right? So, then what you guys what have been done by Stanford to make it happen? Right? So that's the question, basically.
Yeah, good questions.
Yeah.
I think Yang Bing is coming in now.
听得见吗？杨校长，你好，你好。Can we start?
I just want to check the sound of Vice President Yang Bing.
Hello. Hi,
perfect.
Arnold.
Good. We can hear you very well.
Shall we let people in, or do you guys want to?
Yes, we can let people in. It's already past 9 o'clock.
Perfect. All right, I'm letting everyone in now.
Let me know when you're done.
Yeah.
线上有7800多人在开始学到文献。8000。
I think most people, if not all, are in. Have a great conversation and dialogue. I will turn my video off now.
Great, thank you. 同学们，各位嘉宾，现场嘉宾们，大家晚上好。
Dear class, dear guests, good evening. Let's start the second session of today's class. We are very honored to have with us Professor Yang Bing and former president of Stanford, John Hennessy, here today. They are joining me in talking about leadership, entrepreneurship, and innovation, their understanding. If you are online, you can listen to Chinese. You can also listen to English. President Yang and me will speak Chinese, and Professor Hennessy will speak English. Before the discussion starts, let me introduce the two guests. Professor Yang is Vice President and Provost of Tsinghua University, the President of the Graduate School of Shenzhen. He's also the Chairman of Shenzhen Leadership Center. So President Yang is my leader, actually. President Yang joined Tsinghua University in 1987. He was actually below me. I came to Tsinghua in 1981. He got his PhD in management, and his major interests are business ethics and corporate social responsibility. Professor Yang is my personal friend. Last year, he asked me to write the preface for a book he translated, and the book was Leading Matters, written by Professor Hennessy. The book was about his understanding of leadership. I was honored to be invited to write the preface. I read the book and I benefited a lot. So I felt very delighted to write the preface, which is very long, the longest I've ever written. So I'm very happy that Professor Yang is here with us today. Professor Hennessy is a professor in computer science and electrical engineering. From 2000 to 2016, he was the 10th president of Stanford University, and in 2017, he launched the biggest scholarship program. And he is now responsible for this scholarship or fellowship. Professor Hennessy is a leader in computing, and he entered Stanford University in 1977, and he was a dean of the computing department of Stanford University, and he went through chairs all the way up to the 10th president of Stanford University. He is also on the board of Cisco, and he is chairman of Alphabet, the parent company of Google. Professor Hennessy is a renowned academic. He won the Turing Prize. He is also a successful entrepreneur, and he is a venerated administrator, being president of the Stanford University. And I think he is one of the founding fathers of Silicon Valley. So he's been very successful in enterprise, in administration, and in education. When I went to the United States, the first course I took was computer architecture. And I read the book written by Professor John Hennessy and his colleague. The book actually disrupted the education of computing in America. I was greatly shocked by the book, and I saw the disparities and differences of education between China and the United States. While he was the president, Stanford University jumped from a regional university to a world-class top university, and Silicon Valley around Stanford University has become the cradle for innovation. And Professor Hennessy encourages students and professors to identify unmet demand, which is a major source of innovation. Therefore, Stanford University for many years has been the most difficult university to be recruited to enter. I'd like to show off here my son and my daughter. My son graduated from Stanford University, and my daughter just entered Stanford University. So I am very proud of parents of alumni of Stanford University. I myself, I read the book Leading Matters, and I think that only professors like Professor Hennessy can write such a book, because he knows the theories. He also has a lot of practice. So in today's dialogue, we are honored to have the author and the translator of the book to talk about leadership, talk about entrepreneurship. So let's welcome Professor Yang and Professor Hennessy before we start the conversation. Now I have a question for Professor Hennessy. As an academic, an administrator, and entrepreneur, you have a successful life. What do you think are the critical factors for your success? And among the critical factors, which do you think benefit our students for their growth if they want to be as successful as you are?
Well, I'd say anybody who is involved in entrepreneurship and helps build a successful company has to think about how they want to take risk, because starting a company, as in many endeavors, requires you to take some risk, and thinking about how to take that risk in an appropriate fashion. So it's not careless risk, it's thoughtful risk, it's ambitious risk. It's an opportunity to do something different. When we actually did our research on reduced instruction set computing that led to the foundation of MIPS, I remember a famous computer pioneer coming to me and saying, "You need to start a company because this technology is too disruptive. It obsoletes too many existing products, and the existing industry will be reluctant to embrace it." And it was only after some companies out there actually canceled their projects exploring the technology that we decided to do it. I'd say a second factor is any leadership position is a position of service. You serve the community, the people who make up the institution you're leading. And that was true when I was in a company. You're serving the people who work for the company as well as the users of the products of the company. And it's certainly true in a university. Your role in leading a university is to try to create the best research and teaching opportunities for the faculty and students in the institution. So I'd say that's a critical factor. A third factor is authenticity and trust. How do you build relationships where people believe in the commitments you make? It's very easy to slip into a mode of leadership where you say maybe where you mean no, and you say yes when you mean maybe. In fact, I took pride in the fact that if I told one of my colleagues that I was going to make X happen, I was going to deliver something, it would happen. It would happen. And that was critical for establishing trust, because there are times when you need to inspire people and get them to reach the extra mile. Early in the early days of MIPS, for example, at one point, the company almost ran out of money. We had 2 weeks of cash left, and we were going to be out of money. And we needed to do a layoff. We needed to reduce the number of people. We had grown too quickly, and we had grown faster than the market would support. And the CEO of the company asked me to get up and explain to the rest of the employees, as we laid off roughly a third of the people in the company, why this was still going to be a great company and why they should continue to work there rather than look for other opportunities. And I had to really inspire them about that we were going to make this a great company. We were going to work together to do it. And that is what happened, but it really took a strong commitment and strong leadership in order to keep people inside the company. And I think it's opportunities like that. It's teamwork, building up a really strong team. You can't in any large organization, you can't do everything. You have to delegate. You have to rely on people. So you've got to build a teamwork relationship so that you can trust your colleagues to take charge for something and know that they will accomplish it and do a good job. So those are some of the critical factors that have been useful for me, both in entrepreneurship, in my academic research, and also in my leadership in the university.
我以为只有我们的公司要让人这个离职啊，公司不好说。没想到您这么
I
成功的。
thought only my company laid off people. I didn't expect that as an entrepreneur as successful as you are, also laid people off. So many factors like taking risk, the courage, the spirit of service, trust, teamwork, all these are talked about in his book. And it reminds me of what I went through when I started my company. Leadership, entrepreneurship were what we relied on. My second question goes to Professor Yang. This year, Tsinghua University launched a documentary called The Great Learning, which was very well received. And you happened to translate the book Leading Matters by Professor Hennessy, and you've been studying and working in Tsinghua for these many years. So for you, the spirit, the culture of Tsinghua University, how is it related to Leading Matters? And what is so unique about the book that attracts you to translate it?
抱歉，可能有些问题吧，听不见杨斌老师讲话。您听得见我讲话吗，杨老师？
好，謝謝。
Okay, sorry about that. Because I'm not the host of the conference, so I have to wait to be unmuted. So anyway, thank you again, Professor Deng, for your invitation to be part of your course again and to have this kind of conversation with the very respectable Professor Hennessy. So both of you are innovators and also at the same time educators. And Professor Deng has a very big schedule with his investment ventures, while at the same time he's taken time to spend the time with our students to share with them his experience. So I thank you very much. So you mentioned about this documentary, and this is part of the celebration of the 110th anniversary of the Tsinghua University. This is like a tribute, like a love letter to the university. It's not fancy. It's not something that is aimed for publicity. And the four figures featured in this documentary are very much like the people we all know. We presented a university that a lot of our students feel like very much identified with. They want to go to such a university. And I was very fortunate, I was very privileged to be able to help with the translation of the book Leading Matters. So what attracted me to this book and why did I want to introduce this to the Chinese readers? I was very active in trying to get hold of the copyright to introduce this book into China. So even before the English version was officially published. So one of the very important reason was that Professor Hennessy talked about the kind of innovation and entrepreneurship in this book to our readers, including graduates from the Tsinghua University, to a lot of the entrepreneurs. A lot of these lessons are very inspiring. We are at a stage that mass innovation and entrepreneurship are very much encouraged in China. In the past, a lot of the entrepreneurial effort relied on sometimes shared opportunities, access to fund, to technologies, well as in the next step is very important to have something that is very unique in order to base your entrepreneurial efforts on. And this entrepreneurship in the future has to be based on technological innovation. In the future, the action has to speak louder than words on the part of the entrepreneurs. 10 key elements for leadership from the book Leading Matters. There are altogether 10 of them. The first one is not charisma, is not the vision that people expect it to be, but the first one is actually humility. It's really about being humble. And to Professor Hennessy, this is really, really important. He also mentioned, and in his book, there are a lot of stories about his own experience. And a lot of failures were also introduced in the book. And that is actually an action embodying humility, which is really important. We can't pretend to be who we are. We have to be true to what we are. We are on a long journey instead of just a short trip. So humility will be very important to sustain you on that long journey. As a leader, humility really plays a very important part in building trust of the team in this leader. Professor Henderson said that in order to understand humility or to understand the importance of humility, if you go around the campus, if you visit a classroom or an office, you will easily find someone who is a lot better than you in some way or another. And that really is the motivation that keeps one humble. I think that also applies in the field of, for example, venture capital, venture investment, and other entrepreneurial fields. Professor Deng once said that to be an investor is like to be a learner every day. We have to learn about new things every day. We have to figure out new plans to meet unmet needs. So being humble, staying humble is really what will keep us on that path to continue to learn. So there is this thing that is common, humility, which is promoted both by the book and by our documentary. So I sometimes come across Professor Deng on our campus. He very much is dedicated to the promotion of education. He is behind a lot of donating efforts, and he is still learning. He is still learning from the university, from the field, and this can be seen in many people of Tsinghua. So thank you. So I also feel a lot about humility. I think when we talk about leadership in China, or the books, in Chinese books, humility is not very often mentioned, but in the book From Good to Better, humility is also listed as number 5 element. When I first came back from the Silicon Valley, we know that there have been a lot of successful cases in Silicon Valley, but a lot of the times, those entrepreneurs, those owners of those startups, they are all very humble people. And so people, some of them have been very successful in that field. Like Mr. Moore, he is very down to earth, he's very friendly, he is not condescending. So when I first came back to China, people would say though, oh, how come you are so like not high up on a throne, or you're not condescending. And then I said, why shouldn't I be? You know, I may have a very successful company, but I'm still a common person, a common human being. I'm just a fellow human being. So humility is very important. There's really no need to put on a facade of mystery or of success or being pretentious. So I learned a lot about humility, really, from my experience in Silicon Valley. And I benefit a lot from that. And I was very much impressed with that key element. So because I have close contact with Tsinghua University, we talked about its achievement in its first 100 years, and we often talked about what we're going to do for the next 100 years. We want to focus on value creation. We want to have well, I think that there are two very important things about value creation. First is about creativity. The other one is about leadership. And I think the combination of these two things are very important. And this will really contribute to the entrepreneurship. And I believe that in this regard, Stanford has a lot of successful experience. I think I can say that maybe Stanford University is number one in terms of its performance, in terms of its cultivation of entrepreneurial spirit. And this is very much attributable also to Professor Sanderson's efforts during his presidency of the university. So I want to ask a question to the professor. So in terms of the cultivation of entrepreneurial spirit, what kind of experience do you have to share with us? How or what have you done to make the Stanford University the best one in your track record in cultivating very successful entrepreneurs? Without Stanford, one can say probably there wouldn't be Silicon Valley. So over to you.
Well, you're correct that the history of entrepreneurship at Stanford goes way back. Originally, I think the original seeds were planted by a legendary dean and provost, Fred Terman. He was the person he's often considered the founding light of Silicon Valley. He was the person that introduced Dave Packard to Bill Hewlett, and he encouraged them to start what was then the very first startup in Silicon Valley. Shortly after that came Varian, another spin out of Stanford, and that was the very beginning. But since then, we've nurtured young entrepreneurs, attracted them from around the world. I decided that we needed to do some more on entrepreneurship education when I was in my role of dean in particular. I felt like, I know that when I started a company, the list of things I didn't know was very long about starting a business and running a business. And that led me to make some mistakes. Quite frankly, and that after I had to do that layoff, I said to myself, never again. I will avoid this in the future because it's extremely painful. And of course, it can kill the company. So I decided that we needed to strengthen our entrepreneurship education. We had lots of young people who had great creative ideas, who wanted to become entrepreneurs. And I wanted to make sure that when they went to Sand Hill Road to talk to venture capitalists, when they went to recruit other engineers, they would really understand what they were doing and have an even playing field rather than being at a disadvantage in those discussions. So we built a very vibrant technology entrepreneurship program called the Stanford Technology Ventures Program that over the last, now probably 30 years has developed curricula and materials for teaching entrepreneurship. And that's created a situation where our students are much more prepared to be successful in that avenue. I think we also try to emphasize, as was pointed out, and Professor Yang said so clearly, it begins with technology. It begins with an innovation of some sort that you have. It can be an innovation in the business sector, something that thinks differently about an Uber, for example, or an eBay, that aren't so much technology companies as a new way of doing business, as a new business model, right? Sharing economy or something of that form. Or it can be a deep technology entrepreneurship. Google Search. Google Search is a deep technology innovation. And so we've got both of those. They need to be developed and steered in different ways, but the key thing is they're new concepts, they're new approaches. And if you can build a significant lead early on, you can build a sustainable advantage building deep on that technology. And that's the key to building a long-term company that lasts, which is really what our interest has been.
谢谢。其实我觉得斯坦福的这个环境很好啊，有时候感觉那些像
Thank you very much. So Stanford is a very great environment. A lot of those entrepreneurs received their investment early on from the professors, right? In Tsinghua, it was still not possible with our perhaps salary. We can't be angel investors yet.
这个清华大学可能在世界上说，可能我们所处的地理位置，中国的创业环境。
So Tsinghua University
其实我们是最有可能，不仅仅在中国
is the most likely to catch up with Stanford or even overtake Stanford in entrepreneurship education in China. So my question for Professor Yang this time is, what are you doing now in entrepreneurship education? And what are your expectations for the future? I still remember clearly that 7 years ago in 2014, October the 16th, at the closing ceremony of the annual teaching conference, we invited Deng Feng to give a report. He talked about why he believed entrepreneurship was the most important, one of the two most important capabilities for university students. One is innovation, the other is entrepreneurship. I still remember that report, just like it happened yesterday. At that time, I talked to Deng a few times, trying to talk him into coming back to Tsinghua to be dean. But he had the Northern Light venture capital, and he got new financing, and he has responsibilities for his investors, so he couldn't leave, but he promised to come to Tsinghua to promote Tsinghua's education in entrepreneurship and innovation. He promised that, and he delivered that promise. So here in Tsinghua, actually, even when we need cash, when we need capital, Professor Deng also helps with that. So now Tsinghua University is doing quite well in entrepreneurship education. That's because 8 years ago, Professor Deng made his contribution. So I think Professor Deng said that Tsinghua universities are not able to be angel investors, but I find that graduates of Tsinghua University can be angel investors. I think that for Tsinghua's education, I think we should do more innovation for. I think what's more important is how we change the world, improve people's lives, instead of how we personally are successful, how much money we have made. I've seen a lot in Tsinhua's graduates, and on our mind, we think it's more important to build a brand, to create a technology, and to improve, to make some change. I think this is very important. In China, especially since the proposal of the 14th five-year plan, this is a clear direction. In addition, I have to tell you frankly that since 1992, a lot of important multinational companies set up their R&D centers around Tsinghua University. So Tsinghua students have a lot of opportunities to be intern or to help in these companies, in these research bases. This actually provides apprenticeship for Tsinghua students. Companies like Google, Cisco, Microsoft, they are here just around Tsinghua University. These companies help create an atmosphere and also provide the environment where Tsinghua students can practice innovation and entrepreneurship. I have to say that President Chen, who invited them to come to give the report 7 years ago, he is now mayor, and he also emphasizes a lot on innovation and entrepreneurship. Because we believe innovation and entrepreneurship is more important than investment to the success of a city as well. So thank you, Professor Yang, for your compliment. I hope I deserve your compliment. I can live up to your compliment. Okay. Talking about innovation, I think Tsinghua University is similar to Stanford University, and Stanford University sets up an example for Tsinghua University. That is the communication between academics and industries, between research and industry. I noticed that a lot of professors of Stanford University come from industries, and a lot of founders and entrepreneurs of companies are professors and chief scientists of Stanford University. So such close connection between education and industry means that there is no boundary between the two. And it is very helpful for innovation and entrepreneurship. And I think Professor Hennessy, while he was president, promotes that close communication connection. Here in China, we want to ask Stanford University, how did you do that? How did you encourage professors to start companies? How do you guarantee the interests of universities? How do you promote? How do you encourage professors and students to start up companies? What did you do? What were your considerations?
Well, I think a key was to realize that there was a symbiotic relationship between involvement in industry and the university, so that faculty that were involved in either startups or even consulting and working with existing companies could benefit from that relationship, and the university could benefit, as well as obviously the companies. So and that led to a mutual respect, so that the companies and the university understood one another much better and their different roles that they play. I think the other key was to allow faculty to get involved in startups, perhaps to take a leave of absence from the university, as I did, and then come back to the university and re-engage primarily as a faculty member. That meant that we've had faculty with really in-depth entrepreneurial experience. The founders, not only in my own case, but the founders of Arista, of Tableau, of VMware, there were faculty and students involved as well. The students, of course, stayed with the startup company, but the faculty members came back, and it created a really unique opportunity. An individual who's been a faculty member and taught and worked in a company and helped start a company is a much better teacher on everything from engineering subjects to entrepreneurship and how to think about that. And so we've built on that. And it's only in the last 25 years or so that we've had faculty who have the financial resources to become angel investors. So I think this will happen at Tsinghua too. We really admire the work that Tsinghua is doing in entrepreneurship. It is clearly the leading light by far in China. And it will be one of the world's great centers for entrepreneurship as it continues to develop. I think there's no doubt about it. And I think the leadership of the university and the quality of the faculty and the students you attract really have positioned Tsinghua to really become a leader in entrepreneurship in China and around the world.
谢谢。杨校长，其实我也注意到清华最近
Professor Yang, I noticed that Tsinghua University has changed a lot. For example, me being able to here teach in Tsinghua University, me coming from industry, bringing experience from industries, and professors begin to start their companies. These changes, in your perspective or in your eyes, how will these changes affect Tsinghua University's future? What is your strategic thinking behind this? I agree with Professor Hennessy that in analogy, things are twisted together, theory and practice are intertwined together, universities and university graduates are intertwined together, and different disciplines in a university are connected to each other. And Professor Deng is deeply involved in a lot of work. And Professor Deng has his objective observation of Tsinghua University. For me, being part of Tsinghua University, I can say that Tsinghua University attaches great importance to giving students opportunities to grow in real thing, in real action. So we want students to have not only knowledge, but also have their abilities improved in real work, in real practice, and the experience failures they can develop from trial and error. So this is very good for their long-term growth and development. I particularly want to say, in response to your question, is in the higher education in China, in comparison to Stanford University, we lay focus on one thing. That is, when students are surrounded by noises, they have the determination, they have the clear mind to stay focused. Students should be able to filter from the noises with analysis and should be able to stay focused on their chosen path. In Eastern culture, among Chinese actually value their image in other people's eyes, value how other people see them. Well, this actually can hinder us in our development or jumping from 0 to 1, because you will get a lot of criticisms. In China, in Chinese, we have a word called vision. But I think vision has become clear in hindsight. And very often than not, you find that you are an outlier in many people's eyes. A lot of people think you are dreaming. Maybe in 20 years' time, facts prove that you've become the leader or a pioneer. And in hindsight, people would say you had the vision. But a lot of the times, vision at the beginning was actually regarded as an outlier. So that's what happens in our culture. So we should be able to filter out those noises. I think the training in this ability is not enough. And a lot of the times we want to be accepted by other people, by people around us. And this actually stops us or prevents us from being different, from standing out. And we also have self-censorship. We deny ourselves before other people deny us. So this is one thing in our culture. I totally agree. To be frank, I've been to many schools, altogether 12 schools and universities. Tsinghua University and 3 other universities. So I have actually compared university education. My kids have received Western education. Indeed, being different is the difference between education in China and education in America. In China, kids are taught by their parents to become model teachers, model students, whereas in America, they want to be different. They want to be unique, and parents encourage their children to be different, to do something different. So this kind of education has its consequences in university education, which may affect entrepreneurship and innovation. So I think for Tsinghua University and other universities in China, we need to lay special emphasis on children's ability to be different, dare to be different, dare to take risks, dare to take the less traveled road, dare to be different. Yeah, that's also from my personal experience.
So a lot of students may have this question too. Both of you are very successful. You have very strong leadership, especially you are very innovative and entrepreneurial. So what did you do that was different in the university when you were a university student? What did you do that was different from others? You've been a part of different societies, or what kind of experience really contributed to your development of your leadership skills? Maybe over to Professor Hennessy first.
Thank you. That's an excellent question. I think all of us look for inspiration in different ways and different paths. And during the conversation you just had, I was reminded of Steve Jobs' famous commencement speech that he gave at Stanford in 2005, which every young person should read, because it talks about how he addressed failure and overcame failure, and also how he thought differently. He didn't necessarily know where his vision was eventually going to go, but he went step by step and put together the pieces over time. I think all of us craft a path that is unique. For me, I think I fell in love with research and with teaching early on in my undergraduate years, and decided to pursue that path. But I think the other aspect which has really served me well is a willingness to take a new path, to open a door and go down a different route. Starting a company was not the thing you normally do when you're an assistant professor coming up for tenure, but that's what I was when I started the company. And I think the company really, because it delivered the technology, which up until that point had been purely academic, really changed the understanding and the acceptance of the culture and that technology, and that became crucial. So I think I've been willing, when opportunity knocks, to open the door and take the chance, even though you don't necessarily know where that particular path is going to lead. But the question I always ask myself is, will I learn something new, and will it be interesting? And if I'd say yes to both of those, then I would say yes, I'll follow that possibility.
Thank you，杨校长。
我记得有一次跟邓峰学长在一个
I
比较长
remember that once in a long trip, I had a conversation with Professor Deng about the, let's say, the memories of Tsinghua University in the 1980s. The university students then, a lot of them were doing things that their parents had never experienced, and they didn't have any guidance really from their parents. So they were treading paths, new paths in their own life. A lot of this is still true maybe today.
这个把它变成一种不仅仅是知识，而是全方位的这种学习的这个特征。
Students are not only here learning things; they are experiencing things, new things. Right? Professor Deng, he had a lot of exchanges with both junior and senior students. Very often, they had a lot of young men, aspiring young men, sharing their hopes for the future. They encourage each other, visualizing the changes that they could one day bring to their country. And that experience will, I think, would affect them in their whole life. So this kind of learning from peers, this kind of experience is also very important to anyone. In the book of Leading Matters, I wrote an article about this book. I think that reading is also a very important contributing factor to Professor Hennessy's success. Not only is he a computer scientist, the computer expert, he also had read extensively in the field on the topics of biographies, humanities, all kinds of books. And he's had a very good habit of reading, which was attributed to his mother in his young days. And so when we talk about what kind of factors that will affect us for a long time, for a lifelong experience, I think the first thing is to learn from your peers. The second is to read extensively. Both of these will really arm you for the future. That really reminds me, when we talk about the 1980s, Tsinghua students were very down to earth. But at that time, there are also another two things that are very important that are also relevant to the leadership development. First one is idealism. China was developing very fast in the 1980s, and people had a lot of ideals for what this country could be in the future. And second thing is this kind of collective spirit, or the so-called team spirit, teamwork. In the 1980s, we have a very strong team spirit in Tsinghua University. And another thing I think of now is the will to serve. Whether you are a student union leader, whether you are leading different societies of the universities, you want to serve people, you want to serve your peers, you want to serve the people around you. I think this kind of willingness to serve is also very important in one's experience to grow as a leader. If you look at the Tsinghua Club of Entrepreneurs, we have which is called TEAC. It's called Tsinghua Entrepreneurial and Executive Club. A very important principle of this TEAC is that to be helped, to help, and to help each other. So we benefit from other people's assistance and help, and in turn we want to contribute, we want to do our due share. And this is a very important thing that we have really learned from our experience at Tsinghua. So maybe I have a question. Both of you have had your own companies. You have also helped a lot, offered a lot of help to young people. So I have this question to both of you. Have you had some tough calls? What's your experience with tough calls? Let me explain myself. So in the book, a lot of times I think that students, maybe they were protesting and they would be protesting in front of your house, and they had a lot of requests. And I know that also from Professor Deng's experience, sometimes against very big major policy changes or some credibility issues on the part of the entrepreneurs. So what kind of tough calls have kept you awake? Can you maybe give us a couple of experience or examples of this kind of experience? You first, Professor Hennessy.
Well, I think, Professor Yang, you're exactly right. The toughest situations I've been in involve students, because we who are educators, students are why we're there. They're the heart and soul of the university. And so the situations where we've had students protesting, I've had a protest, a hunger strike, an occupancy of the president's and provost's office building, as well as a camp out in the main quad behind me. Students camped out overnight. I always maintained an open door and a willingness to meet with the students, but we had to meet on fair grounds. They couldn't be. I wouldn't meet if they were breaking the rules of the university. But if they were not breaking the rules of the university, I was willing to talk about anything, whether it was fossil fuel divestment, living wage policies. There was a protest over sweatshop labor in athletic wear. There was even one situation where the hospital workers were on strike, and they came to protest at my house personally, even though they didn't work for me directly. So, but keeping lines of communication open was the key to resolving all those issues. And I have to say that in some cases, the students discovered things that were wrong in the university that I didn't know about. A university is like a company. It's a big operation. Things can go wrong that are not aligned with our values. And the students in one particular case found that some parts of the university were operating in ways that were not the values of Stanford. And that made me humble about listening to their input and their views and asking, could we do better? Should we do better? So for me, it was a learning and a growth opportunity as well. As hard as it was hard, but it was also an opportunity to grow and learn and listen.
对，我也是做创业过程当中，我有很多很艰难的决定需要做。
So in my experience, I also come across with a lot of tough calls. Sometimes your decision may be misunderstood. It can be very painful. So I had two very difficult calls. There were two kinds of very difficult decisions. The first, of course, is to lay people off, right? Especially people who have contributed to the company, and it's a very, very tough experience, both emotionally. There's a conflict between how you feel about the things and how you think this thing should be done. So another thing is another difficult kind of decision is to decide whether you want to sell your company, because when you sell your company, again, some of your employees may have to be let go. So for these two kinds of tough calls, I have to stay out of it. I have to look at it not from my own perspective. I need to look at the overall picture. For example, if I have to let one person, I want to think about how that will affect other employees. How will this affect this particular employee? Maybe after some time, this employee may be happier in the new position, because that kind of letting go experience may be a new opportunity for him. So as a founder of the company, very often it's very difficult for us to sell our companies like a baby. But if you think of the interests of all your stakeholders, and if you take the picture into consideration, it really lessens the pain. Thank you for that question. We scheduled for a 1 hour discussion. So before I wrap it up, I hope that maybe each of you would offer a brief piece of suggestion, or maybe your expectations for our students. Maybe Professor Hennessy first.
Well, what I would say is the Tsinghua students that I've had the opportunity to get to meet are truly remarkable individuals, capable of really making important contributions to the world. So I would say, follow your heart, follow your vision, be bold. And you can really make a difference in China and in the world.
在要领这本书中间，有一个词的翻译。
In the book of Leading Matters, we really we had a lot of discussion on the word legacy. So this sometimes in Chinese can be used exchangeably with heritage. And so we had a lot of this kind of discussion. So for us, we wanted to really think about what kind of legacy we will leave for the world, both physically and spiritually. So this is a question that we need to ask ourselves repeatedly, maybe at different stages of our life, maybe every other few months. So now, with that question in mind, you can think about where best to put your energy, where best to put your efforts, and how can that really make a difference to the world. So I think your suggestions really come from your wisdom. I personally benefit a lot. So to conclude, I would like to thank you again for your time with us, for your sharing of experience, and wish you good health. Thank you. So that's the end of tonight's discussion. Good night.
Good night.